patch has arrived in the game. The dust has settled a little bit. Let's talk about it. We got a whole bunch of changes here to basically everything. We got Alack Tempest. We got Alack Scourge. We got DPS Druid. We got Spectre changes. We got a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot in here. Like, everything's got quickness. Everything's got alacrity. A million cooldowns changed. But what actually happened? I don't know. I'll tell you now. It's time to get into the mix. And we're not going to mess about. We're going to get directly into it. Let's go Elementalist here, gamers. So, there's a few interesting things that actually ended up happening here. The star of the show, I actually think, is a build that I've wanted to get improved for a long time, and that's actually DPS Alack Tempest. So, these two changes in particular really helped out. We have Tempestuous Aria now gives you a stacking damage buff, or rather, it stacks in duration. You can get it up to 10 seconds if you use multiple auras in a row. So, apply an aura to an ally, and you get 10% just overall damage, strike damage, and condition damage, in addition to its previous effects. And Lucid Singularity, the alacrity duration has gone up from 3 to 4.5 seconds. Two things came out of this, and they're quite unusual consequences. One, Alack Tempest now does a lot of damage and also doesn't need to have this weird mix. Previously, one of the issues with this build, which I think was why it wasn't actually seeing that much play, was actually that it had this very unusual Celestial Viper Grieving mix. Now you can just get away with just pure damage output. You can even go full Viper. It's actually pretty insane. You may want to have a bit of Ritualist gear on because otherwise the rotation might end up being relatively tight, so you can have a bit of flexibility. But yeah, this build is actually really strong now. It gives might output because of the Warhorn and Fire Overload, protection with Earth Overload, and boon extension with Warhorn 4, and of course you duplicate Fury as well. So not only do you get a little bit of Fury from Arcane Prowess these days, which is actually quite nice, that you can share out, but also if anyone gives you Fury for any time, you'll basically make it permanent on your entire subgroup, which I think is actually pretty cool. So yeah, that build is actually now a thing. Of course, still has all of the Elementalist goodness too. You can heal your allies a little bit. You have your good heal skill as well, Water Overload, water skills as well to kind of dip in there as well. Overall, a really nice build in my opinion, actually, and I'd certainly recommend giving it a try. I'm going to be trying out as well. Maybe even in some of the speedrun stuff. Okay, I've been assigned, the spreadsheet gods tell me I have to play that build now. So that's going to be fun. We'll check that out. Quickness Catalyst, I think, actually also got significantly improved because now, Spectacular Sphere means all of your spheres give quickness instead of just the air sphere. A lot more flexibility in the rotation, and when you can use parts of the rotation, parts of the boon output, can now be kind of saved a little bit more because you're not so locked into this very kind of strict rotation with how you go about playing it. So I think that build's also a fair bit better as well. It certainly wasn't bad before. It was more like a slightly unusual, slightly strange build, but this really helps if you've got to move. If people miss the quickness, now they don't have to wait until you have another air sphere. A lot more consistent, a lot better overall. And then there's some fun stuff here as well. The PvP players, they're not happy, okay? Because Catalyst is absolutely... It's just going berserk, okay? It's... Catalyst is pretty good right now, okay? In PvP. Yeah, it's a little overtuned. To be honest, with how it's operating right now. It's the same build, right? It's the Fresh Air Catalyst build that is kind of dominating PvP currently. Unbelievably strong, incredible boon access, incredible damage output. Its range is very, very durable as well. It's pretty nutty. And some of these changes, honestly, did not help, right, at all. Because the signets are crazy, right? In particular... I think it's like the Earth one that's the most problematic because it doesn't give you toughness anymore. It just reduces damage incoming on you by 10%. And you combine that with Written in Stone. So I guess it's not Fresh Air anymore. You're going for the Earth trait line instead. So you're just ridiculously tanky, right? Insane tank, insane sustain, insane damage output. It's pretty wild, to be honest, because you just have permanent damage reduction, huge damage output. It's something, right? It's something. Probably needs a little bit of a tuning patch happening there. It probably needs to happen. But yeah, there you go. That's basically the deal for Elementalist, I would say, overall. Of course, Lucid Singularity change also helps heal Tempest in PvE. quite a lot with being a bit more flexible with its rotation. You have a lot more boon up time now. It is still slightly weird. You're still a little bit locked into the rotation, but you're a lot more flexible now, especially with when you've got 100% boon duration, you're going to overcap very, very hard. With this one overall. The only big downside of the new Tempest is that you don't get the alacrity, the stability on Overload anymore, which is a really nice trait to have. But yeah, you know, like, it's not the end of the universe, right? Like, it's a trade-off that you can have for a little bit of extra damage. DPS Tempest. I feel like DPS Tempest was a bit of a letdown with like, oh yeah, they're going to make DPS Tempest. Like, are they going to buff the overload damage? Whoa, this is going to be so crazy. And it's not like bad or anything. It's not like, oh wow, this is like a complete trash build. But I think it's pretty unimpressive. I thought they were going to go a bit harder on buffing DPS Tempest. But you see, they didn't buff DPS Tempest because it turns out that when they add Sword to every single Ellie build, oh yeah, that's when stuff's going to get busted. So that's basically the deal with that one there. Enjoy. That's basically it there for Elementalist. Actually, quite an exciting patch for the Ellie mains, especially if you like making your opponents uninstall in PvP, which, I mean, look, that's the end goal, right? True victory, here's a tip for you. True victory is not defeating your opponents. True victory is making your opponents not want to play anymore. Okay? Ooh, yeah, that's big. So, Engineer, what happened over here? I think not the craziest patch for Engie overall, I think. To be honest, like the Scrapper rework, I have very mixed feelings about this. I kind of like the idea of Scrapper being really combo-oriented. That's really exciting, I think. But I do think the implementation is not quite there yet. I'm not a huge fan of the animation lock of Rocket Leap, especially seeing as it's a cool evade that you can use to maintain DPS uptime. I don't like that that's kind of now part of the rotation. I don't like that Function Gyro is a blast finisher, kind of mandating its use in applying quickness. I think the way to go maybe to either have a new trait or make kinetic accelerators change Electro Whirl into a blast finisher. So that now is like your core quickness application as opposed to something else. Or allow whirl finishers on kinetic accelerators and maybe reduce the amount of whirl finishers on Shredder Gyro to kind of remove the kind of how extreme that skill would be, and spread the quickness out into some of the other abilities. Because I think that the idea is good, and I think that players would actually like it, to be honest, and I think it's a cool idea, but I do think that the current implementation is not quite there, to be honest. I want Function Gyro to be free, and I'm not a huge fan of just animation locks being tied into boon application, to be frank. Not a huge fan of that overall. In terms of a lot of the cooldown tuning, I mean, it's just nice, right? It's just kind of, oh, you have free cooldown reduction now. That's pretty cool stuff, I guess. Overall, you know, you love to see it, I guess, but I don't think this actually affects things too much. It's just a little bit of tuning, kind of aimed at more world versus world, I'd say, to kind of slowly nudge Scrapper to kind of where they want it to be a little bit. They want you to use Power Wrench as well, but you have to give up Static Discharge in PvP. A little bit of a tough sell, to be honest, in that regard. But yeah, just some nice cooldown reductions over there for Engie. The big stuff actually happened with Mechanist because some of the barrier got shifted, and the TLDR is the following. The passive barrier is down on your Mech Pulse and your Mace Auto Attack. In fact, it's gone. There's no more barrier on Mace Auto Attack. And it got moved onto the more active barrier. So Mace 2 has barrier now, which is actually really cool, by the way, on Heal Scrapper, when you can use the weapon coming in the expansion. And Barrier Burst and Barrier Signet now apply a lot more barrier. And what's interesting about this is I think this is actually a buff overall. It's, if you play Mech badly, it's significantly worse. But if you play Mech, guys, this is not an Apple computer. Okay, if you play Mech well, okay, you know, we can have like the Mech with the Apple logo on it now, guys, you know. Okay, if you play Mech well, I actually think it's a significant buff, seriously. I think it actually is. I've been playing some Mechanist in raids and Harvest Temple challenge mode and so on, and I actually found the barrier to be extremely strong, actually, when used correctly. You can be kind of getting people up to like 6k, 7k, even 8k barrier, even potentially like 9k or even 10,000, like when you use these skills correctly, which I think is extremely strong, actually. It really is. But you do need to manage those cooldowns a little bit better. and use those abilities more efficiently. Alacrity uptime, in my opinion, is not affected by this in a significant way, not on heal mech, and on power DPS mech, it's not relevant whatsoever, to be honest. You're still totally fine in that regard, so doesn't really change things whatsoever, in my opinion, as long as you are it's a little bit tighter on the execution, but it's still a very, very strong build, arguably a little bit better. Mechanical Genius here, this is a very interesting one. So two things happened here. One, instead of just the mech losing stats, what happens now is the mech, your cooldowns on your mech skills are higher if the mech is more than 360 away, and there's no grace period. It's defined entirely when you activate the skill. One, I'm not actually totally sure if having this type of drawback is even necessary, but if it is, let's assume that it is, because it looks like they do want to go in this direction. 360 is way too small. And I'll tell you why. It's because the mech AI sucks. It is very wandery. It always kind of gets stuck on things and just goes off into the jungle, into Narnia very frequently. It's annoying to manage it, and to be honest, it can be a bit inconsistent and gimmicky. It doesn't feel super bad when you actually get the increased cooldown. It's a bit harsh. 50% is harsh. I'd probably take that to 33, to be honest. But I'd probably also buff the radius to 480 or 600, because 360 is actually very small, to be honest. It's very, very small, and I think it's a little bit too small. That's it. But actually, I don't view it as bad. I think it's an acceptable drawback to have with a little bit of tuning. Again, I think ArenaNet is a little bit worried about mech, because it is one of these builds that has the potential to be very, very oppressive with how it operates. They're being a little bit careful with Mechanist. But there you go. That's basically the deal for Engineer. There's a lot of notes here, but mostly it's cooldowns being reduced, which is just overall nice, right? I mean, look, it's, oh, you get a bit more CC and PvE when you're taking battering ram on your heal mech. Nice. I kind of like that, you know? Ooh, very good. You know, AED, just nice to have a lower cooldown on that, right? That's kind of the gist of the NG. It's just like, oh, yeah. Not too bad. Moving on to Guardian. Let's go. So, Guardian is a really interesting one here. Again, like, most of the notes are basically just like Omega cooldown reductions, but you'll notice here, stand your ground cooldown is 24 seconds in PvE now. Okay. There's this big Firebrand buffs here for PvE that are a little bit weird. So stand your ground cooldown is down. This skill is now by far the best skill in the game. It's 600 radius, 5 stacks of stability with a 24-second cooldown. That's under 20 seconds with alacrity, by the way. This skill is absolutely busted. Ridiculous skill, to be honest. Not exactly sure what they were doing there. With that, you know, you do love to see it. They actually did it. They were going to nerf the cooldown, or rather, they were going to decrease the cooldown on advance as well. It was going to go down to 24 seconds in PvE too. That would have been so disgusting if they did that. But they didn't. However, Bow of Truth cooldown goes down to 20 seconds. That's really good for heal Firebrand. Litany of Wrath, any DPS Guardian build, having a lower cooldown on that is actually, this is one of the best heal skills in the game. So any DPS guard build is super happy about that. Signet cooldown also is really nice because it means you can use it for CC more frequently, right? You can use it for the utility on Signet of Wrath more frequently. Super happy. Not bad whatsoever if you're any kind of aggressive Guardian build. Wall of Reflection cooldown down, also pretty nice. DH just gets... Now this trait is just trap slow enemies. You can pick any trait you want now on Dragon Hunter in the Adept line, which is actually pretty exciting. So there's some other utility you can bring to the table, some more movement, some more immobilize on your F2 and so on. So that's somewhat interesting. But, you know, they probably need to reduce some of these traits a bit. But again, you know, we're kind of stalling here. The really big stuff is actually on Firebrand. Weighty terms. I'm honestly amazed they did this. So weighty terms. 1, all mantra cooldowns and recharge rates went down in accordance with what the trait did by default. But secondly, you get 2 pages when you fully expend a mantra now. This trait was already insane at 1. This is kind of one of the things that made heal Firebrand a fair bit better, and it made quickness Firebrand a fair bit better, and it made DPS Firebrand a fair bit better, and now it's 2 pages! This trait is crazy. You have so much more utility now, way more utility, way more pages, way more fuel in the engine, for all of your Firebrand builds, for Heal Firebrand and the damaging variant. Really strong. Really, really strong. And on top of that, DPS Firebrand gets a bit of a buff because the bleed duration goes up by 50% on Unrelenting Criticism, which, by the way, actually, I think that it's very exciting to have DPS Firebrand right now. That build is actually pretty cool. You do a lot of damage. It's nearly 40k DPS. Great utility because you're playing Guardian and you have access to all of the tomes, right? Which is really, really cool stuff. And, you know, you now can do it even more because you got weighty tomes. It's good stuff. You have the Elite Mantra with stability for free. You can do all the Guardian things. Actually a really good build. And you're really tanky. And you don't have the weapon slot, so you can take shield offhand too if you want to. Wow. What a build. What a good build. You absolutely love to see it. It is fantastic stuff. It is beautiful, my friends. It is beautiful. Oh my god. Yeah. Oh, man. Incredible. Incredible stuff. It really, really is. The other thing that kind of happened is something. Wait, what was I going to say? I've completely lost my train of thought. I was like, just thinking, oh yeah, PvP. PvP here. Okay, so with PvP, I actually have heard like a few rumbles that Firebrand is actually not complete trash in PvP right now. So Firebrand mains, there might be a flicker of hope there for you. The page economy being changed a little bit, right? Some of the PvP cleanse being rejiggled a little bit with opening passage, clarified conclusion, and the mantra of law. That's the mantra there, basically. These things being jiggled around actually kind of help a little bit with Firebrand. And, of course, like some of the tuning that's been happening there with the numbers being tuned around on the page abilities, like what they do, like how much value they actually have. Pretty actually exciting. Okay, it's pretty cool stuff in that regard. But, yeah. Yeah. Some good stuff for Guardian, you know, like all those Guardians, they always have so much trouble, guys. You know, they really do, you know, like they have a hard time in the game, and it's good that it's getting a little bit easier for them here with this patch. Fantastic stuff. Embrace the Guardian, my friends. Embrace the Guardian. DPS Firebrand, seriously, it's kind of the new Scourge, except melee, you know? Ooh, yeah, very exciting. You got your Aegis, you got stability, you got healing, you got cleanse. You got damage, you got AoE, because you got the AoE burns. That's incredible stuff. You love to see it. Next up is Mesmer, and the really big news is that Mirage got its dodge back, okay? Wow, exciting. And you know what's weird, actually, is that I don't think Mirage made that much of a splash, to be honest, in competitive, because the game has kind of been power crept a lot, and Mirage did get nuked pretty aggressively, so hey, there you go, you got it back. Virtuoso all got hit as well. That was the main target with a lot of these nerfs, was trying to make Virtuoso a little bit less obnoxious, so reducing the damage reduction, the boon uptime on that build, and of course removing the block with Blade Turn Requiem in PvP, so it doesn't block anymore, so you have less block uptime, and you have less distortion as well in PvE, because that was honestly very, very busted. So some significant nerfs to the defense in PvE. However, the damage is absolutely insane now, because of course Blade Turn Requiem can now be instantly cast, basically, so you can get just more free uptime on your 5% damage modifier. So Condi Virtuoso is crazy, especially with some of the usability improvements to Blade Call and Unstable Blade Storm. So Condi Virtuoso is absolutely insane. It is really, really strong right now. You just love to see it. And on the Mesmer thing, I guess we better talk about Confusion. So a big thing happened to Confusion. The damage got normalized a little bit, so you get way less damage in PvE when an NPC uses a skill, and you get way more just from the tick. This basically made it a lot more consistent and easier to balance. And yeah, it's, you know, it's basically turning all the conditions into kind of the same thing, which I think you can certainly criticize that, to be honest. But it certainly makes it a lot easier to balance. Basically, it changes Confusion from being very mediocre on certain encounters to absolutely broken to pretty good everywhere, and like, ooh, a really nice to have on certain encounters, which I actually think is a pretty good way to have things. I'd liken it to Old Torment, and this is kind of why I prefer the I preferred Torment how it was back in the day. Torment used to do damage when bosses moved or when a target moved. To be fair, let me clarify. In PvP, this is horrible, okay, because moving is so important there, but in PvE, it was kind of interesting. It was like the opposite. Like, there's always been this like push and pull between PvE and PvP on the design of Torment. But basically, in PvE, Torment was like, oh, the boss moves. I do a fair bit more damage now because the boss moves. I think that was like an interesting dynamic, and I feel like that's where confusion is going to be now. It's like, oh, the boss attacks fast, and my build is like, you know, is like juiced up here. I think that's actually quite exciting. To be honest, I do love to see that. Although I think the numbers are actually still pretty high, by the way. Mirage is still a bit of a blaster, and it might end up being a bit more of a blaster elsewhere. Alack Mirage did get a bit of a bop this patch. However, I think it is actually worth noting that in the follow-up patch, that actually does get addressed pretty effectively, right? Like there's a new trait that's going to affect how Alacrity operates on Alack Mirage that kind of allows the build to make a little bit more sense and not kind of get bullied by the lack of trade-offs that Mirage has when it comes to its boon application. So that's pretty good overall. And then Chrono got some big reworks. They've come up with another design for quickness and alacrity. Now it's going to be tied into summoning phantasms. Very worth noting, this doesn't address the fact that you kind of do need a target to actually apply your boons, which is a little bit awkward still, I would say. However, it's still pretty snappy because, you know, when you summon, a phantasm is pretty fast, so there shouldn't be too much of a wind-up on a lot of these boons. I guess it's mainly an issue with alacrity. However, you can shatter just, you know, randomly to give alacrity because of flow of time now becoming AoE in the same way that seize the moment is also like a little bit of AoE quickness as well. And what's kind of cool about this is that this is kind of, they've tried to make this more of a thing in World versus World 2, because when you summon A, right? So that means that, especially combined with another, there's another trait that allows you to give your phantasms distortion when they spawn, so they might actually be able to do something. They're trying to make Mesmer a bit more well-rounded in World versus World, I think. But in PvE, this is actually pretty insane right now. Like, you can do some serious damage output and also apply these boons. Like, Chrono, Chrono is one of these builds, okay? Chrono is one of these builds where I just look at it and go, like, surely this has to be good. It's got all this boon access on a variety of weapons, right? Like, of course, shield, not really necessary these days, but you definitely can take it. It's got protection on it, it's got might, it's got swiftness and fury and stuff like that with dueling and so on. It's like, man, surely this has got to be good at this point, right? Like, how many more patches? How many more patches does Chrono need to be good? I do think that it is still a little bit gimmicky, and we live in this weird world where if your build doesn't apply every boon with an instant cast ability that requires no it's always good without any kind of situationalness whatsoever, it's not good enough if you were to play it. So it's like, oh man, like, what are they got to do? They just got to make it so you press one button and give every boon in the entire game. I guess that's what it takes to compete with Firebrand and Mechanist, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about this, but, you know, the numbers definitely look good, and I think you actually will see Chronomancer seeing a lot more play with stuff like this. Like, the Chrono mains will crawl back into relevance with some of these changes, at least for the time being. But I think, yeah, people miss old Chrono, right? They want the Signet of Inspiration days back. To be honest, when I look at these notes, this is a slight segue here, but, man, this game is hard to balance. That's all I can say. It's like, there is so much going on here. Like, the boon system is really turning into a bit of a nightmare, I think, for ArenaNet to balance. Because we've kind of... It's not just the boons, it's how you apply them, right? It's like a double whammy, right, of difficulty. It's like a chain link of balance. It's absolutely merciless, right? Really difficult to actually make this design compelling to users and so on. Really, really hard to do, I think. That's for sure. Ooh, look what's up next. That is right, my friends. Here we go. It is Necromancer. Ah! Okay, well, we've got good news and we've got bad news. So the good news is that next patch, I actually think Scourge is going to be insane, right? We can't see these changes here, but if you see my other video about the updated notes, I'll give you the quick TLDR. They're reworking a lot of traits in the Scourge trait line that just give it way more damage. In fact, Scourge is looking to be dealing 42k DPS next patch, is coming up I believe on July 18th, I think, is when the next patch is. So it is going to be insane, and I also think that makes Alacrity DPS Scourge a lot more compelling too, because it will get a bit more damage, and it will also apply protection in the next patch. So that is the good news. The bad news is that right now, oof. Big oof, unfortunately. Scourge is definitely not bad right now, but its damage is certainly underpowered now for what it does. Its utility has been nerfed a fair bit because it can't affect as many targets anymore, not consistently anyway. It doesn't have as much damage reduction, it doesn't have as much expertise, right? It's just a fair bit weaker and definitely underpowered considering the current state of the game. But don't worry, they are actually fixing DPS Scourge pretty well next patch, I would say. You're still going to have the ability to basically burst up to loads of targets, right, by placing down your shades, but you won't be able to hold 3 shades. But yeah, next patch, a lot of these issues do get addressed. But still, right now, bit of a tough time for all of our Scourge friends, okay? You hate to see it. You really do. You know, you really, really do. And there's a bit of a weird thing here going on. Heal Scourge is definitely, like, the main casualty of war here. I think that it's gone from being a gimmicky but unbelievably powerful build to a less gimmicky but incomplete build at this stage. It has... okay, it's pretty good at reviving. It's still probably the best thing, actually, when it comes to reviving, simply because Transfusion can move down states. This is an incredible piece of utility. It's like search and rescuing 5 people at the same time. It's very, very strong. But its barrier is significantly more mediocre. And if you play the Alac build, you don't even get like a high target cap. Your barrier output is very, very low, and the shade is small. It's the small shade, not the big shade. If you take Alacrity, which is actually a massive deficit. So you cleanse less, you have barrier. You only have like 2 heal skills. You have Well of Blood, and you have Transfusion. That's the only way you can heal people, and then regen, right? I'd love they added Aegis to the Snake. This is actually really cool for DPS Scourge, by the way, because now DPS Scourge has the option to bring a short cooldown Aegis to the table, which is going to be very exciting next patch, I think, actually, when DPS Scourge kind of gets buffed up a little bit. Especially seeing as the barrier... This change here, the Sand Cascade change, this is being reverted next patch, so that's really nice for DPS Scourge and for Heal Scourge too. But overall, Heal Alac Scourge, I do not think is good. To be honest. Weirdly enough, I think Heal Scourge is going to be really good next patch, again, or at least significantly better, because it's going to be 10 target might and 10 target proc. Scourge is such a nightmare for ArenaNet, because it has this built-in feature that can affect over 10 targets. Like, I'm not gonna lie, this is a real tough one for ArenaNet. I feel like they almost have to rework it a little bit, or they have to just... abandon this direction, because I feel like it's just going to be such a headache, because next patch they're giving protection to Sandstorm Shroud on each pulse and when it detonates. So yeah, full Heal Scourge, so non-Alac Heal Scourge basically is going to give 10 target insane barrier output and protection and might at the same time, which is, I think, actually surprisingly good. You know, that actually has some potential, I think, to have some good value in that regard. But I mean, I don't know. It's weird. It's in a really weird spot right now. Next patch, I think the Alac DPS and full DPS builds are very attractive. I think Alac Heal needs more work. It either needs a weapon rework, like Dagger or something. It needs some significant trait reworks to just make it a thing. Because right now, it just doesn't have enough pieces of the puzzle. And with the nerfs, its gimmick isn't strong enough to carry it anymore. You know, like the Transfusion gimmick is far worse. It doesn't double pull people. It only pulls when you activate, not when people go down. Say it used to auto pull them in. All that kind of good stuff. Barrier is reduced, especially on Alac, because you have less target cap. I mean, yeah, it's just not great, to be honest, overall. The extra regen is pretty nice, although you could already upkeep it with staff, so it's not actually that relevant, to be honest, in this regard. And, some stuff happened in PvP as well. They basically removed a lot of the boon removal from some of the traits, like Spiteful Spirit doesn't corrupt. Lesser and Feeble from the Curses Grandmaster does not... remove boons whatsoever. It just applies weakness. I think this change actually kind of killed Condi Reaper in PvP, or at least at high level. I mean, it's obviously still playable, but I think it made it a lot weaker. Bit of a shame, you know, I was having fun in ranked with that one, but GG. And in terms of world versus world, Scourge... It turns out that, oh yeah, the signet trait as well, it got reworked. Now it doesn't, that was kind of a cool trait, right? It recharged your signets while you were in Shroud because you couldn't use them, but it recharged them. Now it just removes boons. It was a bit of a feels bad, man, and you don't get it permanently while you're in Shroud too. So there was some really crazy, like, perma Shroud builds you could do with this that have kind of been reduced down a little bit here. But the Scourge stuff is really interesting in World vs. World. It's a little bit skewed right now because you can actually currently use Greatsword on Scourge, which kind of led to a pretty potent Scourge build actually existing. But it does appear that Scourge might actually be able to cling on, surprisingly enough, because the alacrity, you know, is actually quite valuable, of course. And being able to apply that to your allies is actually pretty juicy. And of course, a lot of Condi cleanse, because now the Sandstorm Shroud actually pulses barrier, which then removes a condition with every single pulse, actually, which is pretty exciting. Actually, it's a lot of condition cleanse that you can bring to the table there. And of course, you have your boon corruption there too. But yeah. If I'm being completely honest, Spiteful Spirit and Enfeeble, removing boons, these traits are kind of annoying, especially Spiteful Spirit. It's like an instant cast AoE boon corrupt. This was very very fun to use because you would just destroy people with it, but it was very unfun, to be honest. And yeah, reducing the overall amount of corruption spam, especially in World vs. World, is certainly a good direction. World vs. World is in this incredibly bizarre spot where there's so much cleanse and so much boon application that you have to have so much boon and so much corrupt just to keep up with it. And this has made the game mode weird. Slowing that down overall is a good direction to go, in my opinion, but this is definitely a work in progress. This is not going to be the last patch that you see trying to adjust this and trying to kind of address some of these changes here as well. But yeah, I'd say there's definitely some work. There's definitely some work to be done on Scourge overall, especially in PvE. They're going to have to figure out some stuff there to fix some of these builds, particularly that heal build. You know, we see this, and we'll see this later with Druid, by the way, but Aina, and I kind of like this. It's not going to see much play, but Aina are moving, they're kind of letting you have like a pure heal build, and I know a lot of people like that from like the roleplay fantasy perspective, which I totally get that. I think that makes sense. The issue is, of course, is that the meta is so oriented in PvE around quickness and alacrity, you're never giving those up, right? So you're basically going to say, if I'm going to run a pure healer, you have to run an extra support. And we already saw people not do this with Heal Scourge, even though it was by far the strongest build in the game. Easily, not even close, by the way. Easily the strongest build in the game. People did not want to run pure Heal Scourge because it meant you had to do an Alac DPS and a Quickness DPS, which essentially complicates your build, your squad building process, right? Which, again, like most players are going to go for the easiest option, right? So they're not going to do that. But it's kind of nice that they're really enabling that type of playstyle. I think it's pretty cool. Pure Heal Scourge, pure Heal Druid. I guess those are the two main ones, I guess, that exist right now. But it's interesting to see that development, and we kind of saw that coming, actually, because I was actually a bit surprised by this. When they were talking about roles in PvE, they basically actually did split off healer on its own. I was like, that's kind of interesting, because that's not really how people play the game, but it's almost like we see a slight implementation of that vision, right? Interesting stuff. Interesting gameplay, if you ask me, in that regard. Okay, and then Harbinger. I mean, Harbinger, it's good. Like, I think we can just do that, right? Look at these elixir cooldowns. Wow, insane. They've gone down. Slight damage nerf in PvE, but I'll tell you a little secret. It's good. There you go. It's still good. Harbinger, you have escaped. You've escaped. You know what? They could actually slightly buff Epidemic a little bit. I feel like they could do that now to maybe give Scourge some of its multi-target back. They could buff Epidemic. They could make the duration decrease go down from 50% to just 33% instead. Ooh. Yes. Wouldn't that be fun? Huh? Ah. Signo Spy. I feel like that skill is also a lot of fun. Yeah, that's going to be content. Enjoy having that cast on you very, very frequently. Power Harbinger. Actually, I'll tell you what. Look, I'm going to give all of you Necromains a bunch of copium. You know, there was actually a pretty interesting idea that someone had. That what if they just basically reverted Scourge and put Alacrity on Harbinger and basically made Harbinger essentially the like a bit like Chrono, right? So you can take one trait for quickness, and then the power trait gives you Alacrity, right? Now, I will say, if they did end up going that direction, I think they still wouldn't put Heal Scourge back, because I think that they, judging by these changes, I think they fundamentally object to a build being that strong, which is honestly fair enough. It was kind of broken. It was a pretty busted build. But yeah, that's like an interesting idea. They could go in that direction, potentially. But anyway, let's move on to Ranger. Let's go. Oh, yeah. Huh. This is actually a fascinating change, because numerically you go, man, some of these changes are crazy. Like 20% more regen, you're a bit more flexible with your utility skills now, but they, they made this one bad to play, didn't they? Like, oh no, bit unfortunate there. Didn't really work out. The good news is that DPS Druid is actually pretty strong, and I kind of almost do liken it a little bit to Scourge in that it has like a lot of utility and support baked into it while it can do its damage output. Really cool build, I think, actually, and I'm definitely going to be trying it out. Really nice buffs there to like the way that the damage output of the Druid, and also the way that the Cosmic Ray radius, like the baseline heal in CA, the auto attack, is up as well to 240. That's actually really strong. Very cool build, in my opinion. And some cooldown traits, cooldown reduction across the board there, so your utility is a little bit better. But, the playability of Druid got hammered. A lot of it is tied into the might uptime as well. The alacrity you can kind of overcap in most situations. It's a bit awkward because you might not necessarily get alacrity on yourself. And on certain bosses, there's a big pain in the ass with the alacrity. But they are fixing that next patch by increasing the duration significantly, which is honestly going to give you a lot of flexibility regarding alacrity. However, the might is, I think... The might is where things go wrong here, and I think they're going wrong-er as well. This is where they need to have a relook and maybe even a slight redesign. Currently, the might uptime is very heavily tied into swapping pets. And this is true of protection as well. The protection uptime is also tied into swapping, so to using your pet skill and also using glyphs, which is supposed to be utility skills. So we've almost like offloaded the spam from alacrity on spirits to two things, to pet swapping and pet skills. Oh, and I guess also a little bit of CA as well. So we've kind of replaced one spam with 3 spams. And again, alacrity is getting fixed in the next update, but might and protection, I still think a little bit awkward. You can kind of overcap it and then you have some flexibility between having to reuse to apply these boons. But look, let's be honest, okay? Let's not cope here. It is not fun, to be honest. I do not think this is good design, and as much as I hate to say it, it's a bit of a back to the drawing board situation, I think. And the problem is with Druid, and this is going to sound really weird, but compared to a lot of the other mega healers, it actually doesn't have enough buttons. I know that sounds really strange, but think about Mech and Firebrand. Firebrand has 15 buttons for free on its virtues. Okay, Mech has 3 kits right now that it's using, and of course you have 3 Mech abilities, and of course weapon skills and basic utility skills too. Like, it has loads of buttons, and I almost like Ranger actually has difficulty here, because what can they actually put some of these boons on? It's hard for them to do that, and I think part of that is because there's not enough boon support on weapons. I actually think that maybe looking at Warhorn and making Warhorn even more disgustingly overstacked might be something they could look at to try and give it some of those boons without tying them into utility skills and without tying them into too much stuff in Celestial Avatar or pet abilities. Because I really feel like pets are Ranger's utility or a big part of it, and I think that should essentially be reactive. The same way that I think quite a lot of the glyphs should be reactive as opposed to being used to upkeep boons. Because the current design is honestly very, very questionable. I'd really have to sit down and think about this one a lot to figure out exactly the way it should go with Druid, but I can tell you something for sure. This ain't it, I'm afraid. Is Druid bad now? Absolutely not. To be honest, I think Druid is actually still strong. It's just annoying to play, right? Like, that's the problem. And there's some pretty cool ideas. I kind of like the idea of, like, sending a spirit out and it, like, does something. That's pretty cool. I don't hate that at all, to be honest, but again, the way it all fits together, all these abilities are a bit over bloaty, and because they're a bit bloaty, you end up using them for upkeep instead of their kind of intended purpose to be a bit more reactive, which is really, really not ideal whatsoever when it comes to Druid and PvE. And another thing is actually Celestial Avatar generation, by the way. Because spirits don't take damage anymore, spirits don't get healed, so on low-pressure fights, such as strike missions, a lot of strike missions, and even raid encounters, or like Sabbather, where there's not much damage, you're actually a bit CA starved, which is really awkward overall. So I think CA generation needs a look. You could maybe generate extra CA when you apply a boon, for example. That might be a way you could go about doing that to help with that issue, because that's like a slightly unforeseen consequence of changing spirits, because sometimes there's just no healing, you know, there's no healing to be done. So going in that direction could be pretty cool. And yeah, I think adding boons to weapon skills would actually be pretty important, right? There isn't much, you know, it's weird. Ranger actually struggles a bit. There's no like support main hand outside of Staff. Staff is a kind of a utility weapon and a healing weapon. Maybe you could put some boons on that. You could put more boons on Warhorn, put some more boons on Axe, maybe somehow, like with a trait in some way. I don't know. But currently, Druid needs a little bit more work, in my opinion, okay? Because right now, it's a little bit sad. Rejuvenating Tides, I think I'd probably just buff the Might duration and maybe get an extra stack. Like, I don't know, something like that. You know, we gotta juice it up. But, hey, at least you guys can play Conley Druid, because Conley Druid is pretty sick, actually. And yeah, then we have Lingering Light. This trait is actually really cool. I kind of love this trait. Look at this thing. When you heal another player with CA skills, it reduces the cooldown of Celestial Avatar. And I think this is actually, really nice for world versus world and PvP, because in those game modes you're quite cooldown starved actually. But there's also this problem where if you let the Druid get it too often, it can be super obnoxious, especially on like a duelist bunker build, actually. So they've tried to alleviate that by making it more of like a team fight thing. So if you're hitting multiple targets, you can kind of keep sustaining. But yeah, in world versus world, oh my god, the output of Druid is going to be crazy. Because you're just going to be in CA, constantly healing, constantly cleansing, constantly blasting. And I love this. This, to me, is almost like the perfect example of a Grandmaster trait. It has a really strong playstyle defining effect. Big fan. And yeah, there's like you can also use it to be like a pure heal Druid in PvE. Although this is where Druid actually suffers from success. There's one thing Druid doesn't need in PvE, and that's more healing. Druid already heals a crazy amount in PvE. It is the go-to choice for solo healing, even without Lingering Light. So it's almost like a little bit overkill, but if you want to see some crazy ass numbers, then honestly, Lingering Light is the way to go. However, I don't see it really being part of the metagame, simply because you know, the Alacrity is kind of like almost like a free pick on Druid, because your healing is already absolutely fantastic. And even better, of course, because you get 20% better regeneration now because of Lingering Magic. Overall there too. And actually there's some other kind of fun stuff happened with Untamed too. Untamed Quickness is getting to... I haven't really heard much about it, so I think it's a little bit... I mean, it's a build, right? You know, it's a build that exists. In PvP, though, this is terrifying, right? Especially seeing as next patch, they actually changed the way this works. Now, you get the ambush immediately when you have weapon swap, instead of having to kind of go in and out again, right? You don't have to, like, reactivate it with this weird F5 combo. You'll be able to just double ambush by weapon swapping, right? Which, honestly, in PvP that sounds terrifying to me. Really, really juicy ability there for Untamed, which is pretty exciting. It does actually have some stiff competition. The other trait is actually pretty good as well, but definitely pretty scary. Terrifying build. You don't want this thing hunting you down. You absolutely do not. And hey, you know, I like that we've kind of set the groundwork here for Quickness Ranger anyway, right? I think overall, that's what this patch was all about, was just setting the groundwork for a lot of this stuff, which is pretty good overall, if you ask me. And Soul Beast also got some just standard buffs there to the big AoE heal skill. And what's weird, we won't be seeing this for a while, but apparently support Soul Beast in PvP is actually pretty exciting. Using Staff, right? And then Sword Warhorn, I believe. Really interesting build there. And I think that's why the next expansion is so exciting, because adding more weapons really enables a lot of builds. So support Soul Beast, you could be in luck here with the Spiritual Reprieve buff alongside Staff there. Very exciting, although of course you won't be able to enjoy that until the expansion. So stay tuned, I guess. Stay tuned in that regard. Yes. But yeah, I think that's just about it for Ranger, I believe. Oh, yeah. They also just made it so Glyph of Equality always gives stability regardless of what form you're in PvE. Honestly, great quality of life, but I have to call this out. Why is it only 1 stack? This is the same on Tempest as well. Guardian has a 24-second cooldown, 5 stack of stability at 600 radius. Now, to be fair, Glyph of Equality is actually a stun break as well. So, honestly, on this one, I guess, you know what, fair enough. But I still think it is a little bit stingy overall. I think you could probably give them 2, okay? You could, well, maybe you can't, because you have Glyph of the Stars as well. I'll be like, oh, it's 1 stack, come on, man. I guess it's a pretty overstacked ability, because it removes condies and breaks stun, and it gives us stability stack. Okay, well, maybe not. But seriously, when I look at Guardian, I go 5 billion stacks. Then everyone else has 1 stack? I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Look, they could just nerf it in PvP and World vs. World, okay? But I feel like we gotta have an extra stack in PvE. You know? Just, you know, a little extra stack. Short cooldown, though. Okay, that's it. Revenant. Revenant is coming up next. Here we go. Ooh, and this is a really interesting one. So let's get the easy stuff out of the way. Heal Vindicated nerfed in World vs. World. It's still good, though. Okay, moving on. Oh yeah, Alliance Tactics. This is really cool. 3-second cooldown on Alliance Tactics in PvE. Really fun, actually. I'm surprised they didn't just make it 1 second in PvE, so you could, like, really go crazy and get value out of that. Really fun change, actually. That lets you get a lot more value out of your Alliance skills much more easily in PvE. Which is really cool. Oh, they actually made it so the Renegade things can't get CC'd. I actually thought they already did that, but I guess they didn't. They just forgot about that one. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's Herald. It is Herald. So, the quickness right now is weird. The might uptime is putrid. Oofy for Herald, for power quickness Herald in particular. Not looking good. And the good news is that next patch, I think they're really bringing it back. So the might uptime is going up a lot because 1, elevated compassion, the quickness pulse is every 1 second, and the duration goes up, and you get more boon duration. 2, and the radius is 6. This is 600 radius quickness, by the way. I had to do a double take when I saw this. This is actually very, very strong, in my opinion. And I think next patch, Herald is really going to be happy with how this actually operates. You're going to be healing your allies a surprising amount over time. You're going to be giving quickness in a very easy, ridiculous high uptime. Seriously, you're going to be running full Zerker. You have 37% boon duration with no concentration gear next patch. It's a little bit of a disturbing trend that we are going in this direction where you have, like, you don't just play full Zerk. You just don't need any concentration on your gear. You just get it all for free in traits. And the only issue, I think, with Herald will be next patch is that you're a bit energy starved. So I think maybe looking at energy costs on weapons might be the way to go. However, overall, I think this build is going to be very, very strong, with the slight caveat that your boon spam of particularly swiftness, actually, is going to go down. But your might is coming back next patch, and the quickness is going to be honestly insane. You're going to overcap like a lunatic. So the thing that needs to be looked at is maybe changing some of the energy costs so you can actually use your abilities. Because again, you are quite starved of energy currently, in my opinion, overall. But still, very, very strong build. It's still a good build now, of course, but certainly a little bit on the awkward side to play. However, that is being addressed. There was a bit of a buff to Condi Herald in PvP as well. This actually build is seeing a lot of play right now, and it's now a little bit stronger, a bit more condition cleanse when you use Demonic Defiance. So, I mean, hey, if you're a Condi Herald fan, nice. And they nerfed Banish Enchantment in World vs. World because this is a bit of a monstrous boon removal skill, to be honest. You would just, like, zap people and remove everyone's boons, you know? Because, of course, this skill is quite interesting. It's a single target skill, but it fires out a line that attacks everyone in between you and your target. So this actually removes a crazy amount of boons, actually. It's 15 boons when you use this if you actually, like, manage to hit everyone. So incredibly good skill for World vs. World. Obviously, seeing as it is so centered around this boon removal capacity, or this kind of boon removal thing there as well. And Heal Herald. I think Heal Herald is actually very exciting in the next patch. Now, I think it's a little bit awkward because your might uptime has been compromised very significantly on Heal Herald. But next patch, there's honestly a lot of fun stuff that you can do. You can still run Retribution to give might uptime now, which, yeah, I mean, you can do that, but you kind of do want to have Invocation so you get more energy so you can use more abilities. To be honest, in addition to like a little bit of extra boon value with the invocation trait line, but it's workable. But next patch, it's actually kind of cool. You've got stability all the time on the tablet now, just forever on energy expulsion. Whenever, and you can spam it as well. You can actually use this a lot. Whenever you have tranquility, which means like either when you just summon your tablet, just blew it up, or when you used your True Nature F2 on when you're on Centaur, that's, you know, the F2, you get the special effect, right? Now, good news, you will have 3 stacks of stability AoE. Now, one thing, I'd love to see them improve the radius of the tablet to 360. I think 240 is too small, even though it is quite strong being able to basically be in 2 places at once, a bit like Mech in a way. All of your boons are still around you. I'd love to see them improve this to 360 to give it that usability, because the tablet is a little bit hard to control anyway. But yeah, I think Heal Herald is actually quite exciting, and will continue to get more exciting actually as well, now that it has stability on Ventari, because now you don't really need Jalus, unless you want to go for that damage reduction elite, or you simply want even more stability, right? You could go for even more. That's really cool and really freeing to the build, actually. So definitely watch this one with some serious excitement, actually, as Heal Herald. Really cool build, I think. Every boon that Heal Herald gives, by the way, is 600 radius. Yeah. Every single one. Quickness, might, fury, swiftness, protection. All of it is 600 radius. That's incredibly powerful, like right off the bat. Like the consistency of that is not to be understated. Oh, apparently Elevated Compassion is healing downstate players right now. Well, that is a bug. It's also very overpowered. So you're actually basically like an Uber heal Scourge right now. Kind of. So, hey, play it while it lasts. Probably won't last for that long. Like I said, the only really big deal is that you're going to be losing a little bit of, weirdly enough, like swiftness uptime. Because the current game plan for Quickness Herald is going to be like you insta-cast Facet of Elements and Facet of Might. And you're going to maintain Fury, Protection, and you're just going to like double tap the F2 for boon extension. So still very, very strong. Like some slight reductions into the boon uptime potential of this setup. But to be honest, that's kind of a good thing. That build was kind of busted in how many boons it put out. It was a bit overpowered. It was very overpowered. So that's not the end of the universe there. But that's basically the deal for Revenant. Boom. Let's move on. Okay. Thief. Thief gameplay. Honestly, Thief mains are kind of eating well here. Heal Spectre, I've seen some Heal Spectre gameplay. I was like, ooh, it's nearly there, isn't it? I don't think it is there yet. And you know what? Thief is now the only spec in the game. We need UI customization options. I feel like no matter how good they make Heal Spectre, until you have the ability to have a better user experience with the ally targeting stuff, I don't even know, man. I just don't, I don't think it can really truly be good until you've got to that point. It really needs a little bit more work, in my opinion. You need to be able to target people a little bit more easily, like better hotkey support, better UI support. Being able to move the squad so you can click on people, I think, would be necessary for this and be really, really useful, much like a lot of other games, like World of Warcraft can do this, for example. It's really, really good. However, Quickness Deadeye kind of slaps, actually. It's a build. That is a build right there. Really, really exciting, actually. It was broken in PvP too. You were like running around like whacking people with your stolen skill for like 7k. They have already nerfed that, but it was really funny while it lasted. Well, probably funny for the player, maybe not so much for the victims. But yeah, Spectre got some great improvements overall, in my opinion. The Alacrity uptime is insane, actually. It is being nerfed, but it will still be perfectly acceptable with a bit of Ritualist gear on that. You now have on-demand stability on the 5th skill that you can share to 5 targets because of the new trait. Essentially, what the new trait does, Shade Step, you tether to an ally, so you get the bonuses, your ally gets the bonuses, and 3 people around your ally, for a total of 5, also get the bonuses. So you can give Alacrity, you can give all your usual Might uptime, Fury, Vigor, Swiftness, Alacrity, and of course, you can also now give a little bit of stability as well on demand, as opposed to just like the stability on your, well, a bounty. You also have crazy resistance uptime on Heal Spectre because Traversing Dusk gives resistance now on all of your wells. So you have great uptime on resistance, which is kind of a niche but powerful effect to actually have. Heal Spectre's protection is still a little bit putrid. To be honest, it's very awkward, and I think the Shadow Arts trait line might need a little bit of a work, because I'm still very unimpressed by the Shadow Arts trait line overall for Heal Spectre, but it's really getting there. there, to be honest. And I think Alack Spectre, really strong with these new changes. And I think in the hands of a skilled player can really carry. A bit awkward, but still very, very powerful, in my opinion. Yeah, the Mind Shock. This is the 5th skill on Shroud. You get a stability when you activate, as opposed to when you detonate, right? Which is very strong. And of course, very strong in PvP as well, right? Because you'll be able to actually stability your, your allies in PvP on demand, right? In addition to, like, activating this, like, big CC style ability as well. So yeah, really cool. I'm a big fan of this, and I hope to see some more iteration. I think Spectre, Heal Spectre is really getting there. Alack Spectre, I definitely think this is one of the designs where they hit. You know, we've seen that they kind of missed on some of the design. Here, this is 100% a hit. I think this is a really fun build to play with some good playability, and also it's powerful, it is effective. Alack Spectres, rejoice, my friends. Embrace it. And yeah, there was some tuning issues. It's a bit broken, but of course, they will be addressing that to make sure that the DPS build is still strong and does a lot of damage, and the Alack build obviously does have that trade-off there as well. And yeah, the big deal also with, like, the support stuff is that your allied targeted scepter skills basically give a lesser effect to allies around the radius. And that definitely gives you some options on the more aggressive builds too. You can just switch to give people a little bit extra might. You can switch to give people some extra barrier kind of while you're going about your normal rotation as well. But yeah, not bad. Not bad overall. And again, Quickness Deadeye, actually pretty cool. Absolute blaster build. Will probably get toned down a little bit. It does a lot of damage. So there's probably going to be an extra trait that you might have to take, or there'll be a trait that has a bit of a trade-off. They'll make a Grandmaster trait a little bit better in terms of damage, but the boon one, you'll have to, you have to sacrifice the damage trait to take the boon one. But that will, honestly, still be totally fine. In my opinion, it will be a build that exists, and you will annihilate with it. And also Daredevil. There's honestly not that much to say here. Basically, Daredevil, the stolen skills got nerfed in PvE, and the damage went up significantly on staff. And this is just a design fix, to be frank. The auto attack got addressed. You'd have to, like, do some weird auto attack canceling, so they rebalanced the auto attack correctly. Power Daredevil now does 40k. You still have solid utility with all of the stolen skills, but it's not broken, basically. And that means that Thief can now be balanced. It's easier for them to balance without making it, like, ridiculously overperformant in certain scenarios. The stolen skills are going to be like, ooh, this is a really nice bonus, as opposed to, this is actually, I'm going to define my entire build around spamming the stolen skill as much as possible, which, to be frank, I imagine Thief players are going to enjoy a lot more, because it was kind of busted, to be honest, overall. So that's the deal. Acrobatics, I don't know. Maybe if you're a core Thief enjoyer, right? Acrobatics, like core SD Thief, okay? Enjoy it. Embrace it. But honestly, it's one of those... Thief has got some weird trait lines. I feel like Acrobatics and Shadow Arts have always been these weird trait lines that have existed in the game that are either a little bit annoying and just very difficult to deal with for your opponents, or a bit useless, to be honest. But that is the deal. Yeah, stealth-oriented trait lines, very good in PvP, to the point where it, made Thief incredibly dominant, but a bit weird in PvE. That is for sure. But I think that will actually do it for Thief overall. I'd say an exciting and fun patch for all of our Thief players, especially in PvE. And definitely a little bit of extra stuff there in PvP as well. Maybe one day we'll see Heal Spectre in PvP. Don't think so, though. That's, well, I mean, you kind of already do. The way Spectre plays out in PvP kind of is a little bit like Heal Spectre to an extent anyway. Okay, and finally, we arrive at Warrior. And, we've got to talk about the big change, guys. Arc Divider. Reduce the number of strikes from 3 to 1. I mean... There's no reason to play Warrior anymore, okay? Yeah. I mean, look, you know what? I will actually offer the branch of sympathy here. I understand. This is a pretty cool skill, right? It was a cool skill that you could spin around and just go berserk, right? It was definitely a very berserker skill. But I will talk about it from a balance perspective. This actually does make Greatsword a little bit underpowered, actually. Overall, it's because the other Greatsword skills aren't that great, and because this had a long cast time, you didn't need as much filler, right, on your Greatsword in PvE. So, yeah, Greatsword actually is a little bit underpowered right now, so they probably need to have a bit of a look at that. The Berserker Quickness build, I mean, it's a thing, I guess, but Berserker in general is just... It's still not there, right? And this is where, you know, you can talk to Nike about this and kind of get the input on this build, but Berserker it's one of the most punishing builds in the game. Like, if you don't get your rotation right, you're going to drop out of Berserk, and good news, you're useless for a while. Right. It does damage, it pumps, it blasts, and if you pull it off, you're a gamer. You know, you're going big, and that's great, obviously. But it's just one of those builds that is just kind of weird, right? It's a strange build. Same with the full DPS build, of course, and the quickness build. It's not a complete build, and because it's not a complete build, it's not going to compete with anything else. Is it playable? Absolutely. Is it that good? Honestly, no. Bladesworn, weirdly enough, is actually a bit better now, though. That's the good news, because not only does the Alak build kind of pump, actually, because it gives a very high duration with the shorter channel time on Daring Dragon. Where are we? Daring Dragon. A lot of alacrity. I like how it's just got the ID there. Okay, that's good, you know, just the little number. Wait, what? Hang on. Can I get some slightly quieter music here, please? Okay, can we figure that out? So Alak Bladesworn is kind of a thing. To be honest, it will probably see a bit of niche play, I would say, because it's not as well-rounded as a lot of the other alacrity builds, but certainly is a thing. The tooltip will never be fixed, yeah, ever. Not in a million years. And you get stability on Bladesworn now, basically for free, on Martial Cadence. And also, a little bit of a heal warrior trait there with Soldier's Comfort. Pretty, you know, that's something, right? You know, that's a thing there. So Bladesworn gives a bit of free stability, which is actually really strong, by the way, in my opinion. It might actually need a look. Like, the Tactics trait line is weird, or Bladesworn is weird, because you just take the Tactics trait line basically for free. And you can get Martial Cadence for free, which is just, I guess, a nice bit of extra value there across the board. But yeah, I think Berserker still needs a bit of work. Spellbreaker got nerfed in World vs. World. The boon removal has gone down a lot, and the wind's duration is down a lot as well. These are still powerful abilities, obviously. It's just that ArenaNet, I think, don't want there to be these big just roadblocks in these Zerg fights. They want you to be clashing. They want you to be fighting constantly. And I think that makes sense. I have played World vs. World a fair bit, actually, over the weekend. I didn't find the boon removal to actually be an issue. I think you still had plenty with all the builds. And, oh, I kind of forgot to mention this in the Virtuoso thing, actually. But Virtuoso, actually a bit of a beast in terms of boon removal. Mesmer in general, doing quite well in that regard, actually, with being able to remove these boons, utilizing that unblockable trait to guarantee you get your blade songs to remove boons. So I actually haven't found the flow of World vs. World to be compromised significantly. Maybe in, say, GVG, that's different. I actually haven't talked to anyone from the GVG community regarding this, but I can't imagine that being the case. I imagine it still works pretty well. Even on that smaller scale, because again, players are going to be very focused, very... and very good at like getting these big spikes of boon removal. So I think this is not actually negatively impacted World vs. So probably the contrary, actually. In fact, because again, that spam, that removal, that application, that is the issue with World vs. World. So yeah, I think that this is a perfectly acceptable change. Like Spellbreaker, obviously a signature build from World vs. World for a long time. Indeed, 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 indeed. And a few changes to, like, the flow management on Bladesworn as well. So this skill no longer gives positive flow when you're under the effect of Fury. It gives you 15 flow when used under the effect of Fury. I feel like this is... The Bladesworn mains are going to be happy with this. I think that managing this was kind of annoying. And hey, look, you know, this will help you when you go out of combat, right? On this will help you when you go out of combat on HTCM, by the way, guys. Enjoy that. Enjoy that. Fantastic stuff. And they kind of did this across the board with the heal skills. You basically just, like, immediately juice up, much like Adrenaline. Instead of kind of having this, like, flow kind of build up over time. So it kind of almost like... It functions a bit more similarly to how these skills work on regular warrior, right? Yeah, I think Nike's right here. You can waste it a bit easier, I guess, because you can essentially overcap yourself as opposed to kind of using it, then it will go away, then it will come back again. But I guess they wanted to almost like normalize the effects of some of these abilities a little bit, kind of across the board there on Bladesworn. But yeah, obviously banners don't give quickness anymore. And I guess we'll talk about Heal Warrior as the final thing here. to be honest, Heal Warrior is waiting for after the expansion. And honestly, I think Heal Warrior could be really cool. We already see a bit of protection creeping in with... Where is the trait? Yeah, with Soldier's Comfort. We have stability on Martial Cadence now. Staff is coming to Warrior. Ooh, okay. That weapon needs to be good. It needs to be really good. But Warhorn has barrier and solid boon application. We're gonna have protection. There's gonna be healing on our burst. Staff will probably be loaded with boons and healing, I imagine. Burst skill with proper healing. All right. Now we're kind of cooking with gas. I actually think we will see some kind of build there. Probably needs a bit more trait line support overall. Right now, we only really have tactics, to be honest, in terms of support for Warrior, so we may need some additional reworks, and none of the elite specs really go in that direction, so we probably need to see an elite spec have a little bit of a capacity to have some kind of support. Otherwise, it's going to be, I don't know, they're going to make Core Warrior a heal thing? Then how are you going to find 3 trait lines, right? So it's a little bit, you know, but there it is. We'll see. Heal Warrior, guys. It's incoming. It's on its way. Okay, it's only a matter of time. It will eventually be good. It will eventually dominate. Okay. But I kind of like it. You know, I think there's a lot they could do. I'd almost like to see them add some extra, I'd like to see some extra utility skills. Make him a bit like a Paragon, right? You know, like some Paragon stuff going on there, like from Guild Wars 1. That was almost like a Warrior support build, right? Because it actually had Adrenaline and Heavy Armor in Guild Wars 1. So I'd love to see them go in that direction. So you can be, you know, you can be like a warrior, a backline warrior, you know, rallying your enemies, sending them into battle, you know. That could be really fun. Some really cool roleplay there with the staff, you know, just, yeah, okay. But anyway, that's basically it. Okay, also, full counter gave 30 seconds of AoE quickness. That was a fun bug. This patch was buggy. And actually, during this outro, before we go and do tea time, which is going to be now, by the way, I do want to say the patch was insanely buggy. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say ArenaNet, or just fix the bugs, ArenaNet. I really do think that a big part of these patches being received a little bit poorly actually is not only because some of the design issues definitely were a bit of a miss, but also the patch was broken. It like broke the game. ArenaNet, please be careful, right? It really does skew people's position on it and their perspective when it like breaks the game as hard as it did. Herald was immortal. Full counter was broken. Deadeye was one-shotting everyone. Fractal God just stopped working, right, for some reason in the new Fractal. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what's going on with that. It was very weird. There's loads of just weird stuff going on in the game. There's even more than that, by the way. I didn't list everything. There was loads of just weird things happening in that regard. It was quite strange. Oh, I forgot to mention that Sword is good for Soul Beast, by the way. A little bonus one there, okay? Which is actually kind of cool, I think. New weapon. Exciting. Although you got a lot of leaps. Have fun with that. But anyway, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what I think about this patch. Like, this patch, in my opinion, it was an interesting strategy. They basically said, we're just gonna get the groundwork foundation for all of the builds we want to exist in the game, and then if they suck, we'll fix them later. If they're overpowered, we'll fix them later. If they need to be redesigned, we'll redesign them. They're like, right, let's give quickness, let's give alacrity, and get as many things going as possible. And I think that's an interesting approach. I don't entirely hate it. To be honest, I think it might be a good idea so they can kind of be working on all of these builds. They want to enable these playstyles immediately rather than kind of, okay, this time we're going to do Alacrity Scourge. Now we're going to do Quickness Soul Beast. Now we're going to do Deadeye. So you have to like wait a year to get your build to actually exist. And I think, you know what? I'll make a bit of a hot take here. I think that most players who aren't quite as sweaty as maybe you or I actually like that. Like, oh, my build exists now. That's pretty hype. So I think a lot of players might actually really enjoy this patch overall. There are certainly issues. I really want to see Scrapper have another look. I definitely want to see Druid have another look, and certainly some changes to Scourge overall. But I think there are some big winners as well. Tempest, really cool. Deadeye, really cool. Spectre, really cool. In here. I think Chronomancer is a big winner in PvE as well, too. Like, I think there are definitely big winners and some really cool things that have come out of this. So, I think, and honestly, the Herald stuff, I think, we already see this with the iteration. That's really exciting where they're going with this. I think, actually. So I think there are some really, really big, good wins in this patch, in addition to things that didn't really work out. But I really want to point out, actually, that ArenaNet, this is not old ANET. And I think a lot of players are very frustrated because they think we're still in old ANET mode, where there's a patch, then you have to wait 6 months to get it fixed, right? That's not the case anymore. Guys, they're fixing quite a lot of this stuff in 3 weeks. Right? And then there'll be another patch. Then there'll be the expansion. Then there'll be another patch, right? Like, they are going to be on this stuff forever. This is kind of new ANET. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is okay. I'm not saying that, oh, they kind of, you know, I'm not saying they didn't mess it up. There are definitely some mistakes here and some missteps. That's expected, especially when they're actually doing things, right? Like, bear in mind, guys, you can't make a misstep if you just do nothing. Remember how dominant some builds were? Like, oh yeah, Firebrand and Mech were like 50% of the player base. Hey, at least we're moving in the right direction here overall, I'd say, with these changes. And if they overstep the mark, if they make a mistake, I'm actually very confident that the balance team will quickly try to address that. And they are looking at feedback. They are responding to what players are complaining about. And I actually have a lot of confidence in the current balance team. Not everything is going to be perfect first try. And yeah, things might change and you might have preferred the old version. And you know what? That honestly sucks. And you know, I'm not going to say that, oh, you know, just get used to it. I really hope that there is something in the game that you can still enjoy, even if some of these things do get reworked. This is kind of the nature of video games. It's the nature of online games that things are in flux. Things are not permanent. They are in a state of flux. But I think ArenaNet are putting in some good work here. I'm very excited, very interested to see what's going to happen, not only with the future balance patches, but also with the updates to weapons, more utility skills potentially down the line, you know, the relics and new rune system. I think it also has a huge amount of potential. And we've kind of seen this, like with the beta. There's been so much potential. So many new builds have kind of like popped out of the ether in various different gamers with the new weapons. I think there's a lot to be excited about for the future of balance in Guild Wars 2. And this balance patch, I think, is kind of a pretty good estimation of how that's going to go, actually. So I certainly understand players' frustrations, and I definitely think that you should criticize us. And definitely, if you're watching this, leave comments, right? Go on the forums and post feedback. Go on the subreddit and post feedback, right? Like, these are the avenues where you can make your voice heard. And I think it's important to know that you are actually being listened to. And I really do think that CMC will try to, you know, interpret that feedback and find an implementation that players are happy with, because I believe it is 100% possible with the direction that these changes are going in. But yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts and kind of conclusion on the patch. Pretty good stuff, in my opinion, but honestly, with so many changes, obviously not all of it is going to work out exactly as planned. Especially, you know, poor old Druid. You know, that definitely got worse. Unless you're a DPS player, then it got a lot better. But anyway, that is it. I've got to go do a podcast and talk about this for another few hours, because that's what I love to see, okay? That will also be here on the YouTube channel, so you can combo. You can just binge watch that directly. You know, you can just chain these together. Like, oh yeah, get that watch time in, guys. But anyway, let me know what you think. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this kind of analysis breakdown of what the hell is going on in Guild Wars 2 Balance. Buy the game using my referral link. Ha ha ha. And yes, look at the Twitch chatter saying hello to you, YouTube. Okay, make sure to subscribe and come on Twitch to join us so you can be the one saying hello, YouTube. Okay? But that's it. Until next time, my friends. I'll see you later. Now they're acting insane to scare you. Don't look, they're not that scary, okay? Get over here. Follow the stream, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitter, join Discord, okay? Go everywhere. Retweet, like, go crazy. Enjoy. Come and spam emotes with us here. But anyway, that's it. See you next time, gamers. I'm out.